Do re mi fa sol la ti do.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, just warming up the vocal cords there.
Sounding good. I think we're ready.
Awesome. Well, welcome to today's deep dive, everyone. I want you to start by just, picturing the ultimate mountain postcard.
Oh, I know the exact image you're talking about.
Right. It's that pristine, snow-capped peak cutting into this hyper blue sky. You've got the lush evergreen forests, the crystal clear rivers. It is literally that flawless Colorado scenery that just draws millions of people to the Rockies every single year.
Yeah, it's the highly curated, idealized version of the landscape, right?
Exactly.
The version perfectly packaged for travel brochures and high-end luxury lifestyle magazines.
But our mission today is to look behind that postcard. We are diving into a stack of sources anchored around today, which is May 18, 2026.
And these are largely curated from the vailychat news automation engine.
Right, so we are going to examine the complex machinery, the historical scars, and the real-time, on-the-ground adaptations that are required to keep a major resort region like the Eagle River Valley actually functioning.
Because it takes a massive amount of effort.
It really does. Okay, let's unpack this. Where exactly do we stand environmentally right now?
Well,
Because the data in these sources, it paints a deeply tense picture of the current ecosystem.
it really does. So the baseline context for everything happening in the valley today is just this intense, sustained environmental pressure.
Right.
The region is navigating a period of severe hydrological deficit.
Which is a fancy way of saying they're out of water.
Basically, yeah. To put the actual numbers on it, the Colorado River Basin snowpack is currently sitting at a 41-year record low.
A 41-year low.
Yeah. We are looking at under 50% of the median snow water equivalent for this time of year.
Okay, wait, when you say snow water equivalent, we aren't just talking about the visual depth of the snow on the ground, right?
Right. No, that's a really critical distinction.
We're talking about the actual volume of liquid water locked in the ice that the region relies on for the entire year.
Exactly. It's their frozen reservoir. And when that metric drops below 50% of the historical median, it triggers a cascade of systemic failures.
I can imagine.
As a direct result, 97% of the state of Colorado is currently classified as being in a moderate to severe drought.
97%.
Yeah, and it alters everything from municipal drinking water supplies to agricultural irrigation and, most immediately, emergency wildfire management.
So while social media feeds are absolutely flooded with these heavily filtered, pristine Colorado views of people enjoying their spring vacations, the reality on the ground is that the community actually living there is operating in a high alert survival mode.
Exactly. And that physical threat to the landscape is really our starting point today.
Okay.
What's fascinating here is the cyclical nature of these threats. Today, the existential danger to the mountain is almost entirely environmental.
Right, the drought.
But if we rewind exactly 20 years ago to this very day, the threat was entirely human.
Yeah, the timeline on this really struck me. May 18, 2006. Today marks the 20th anniversary of the federal grand jury indictments for one of the most notorious acts of eco-terrorism in American history.
Yeah, we are talking about the Earth Liberation Front, or the ELF.
Right.
4 extremists affiliated with the group were indicted for the October 1998 firebombing of Vail Mountain.
And the sources list the individuals named, right?
Yes. Chelsea Gerlach, Stanislaus Meyerhoff, Rebecca J. Rubin, and Josephine Sunshine Overacre.
And Overacre actually remains a fugitive at large to this day.
Which is wild.
2 decades after the indictments and almost 30 years after the actual fires. It is staggering. But the scale of what they did, they burned down the 2 Elk Lodge, the main ski patrol building, and several major chairlifts.
The financial damage was estimated at up to $24.5 million.
And the stated justification for this massive attack was to protect the habitat of the endangered lynx, right?
Yeah, the group claimed responsibility through communique. They were specifically targeting the expansion of the ski resort into what was known as the Category 3 area.
Yeah.
For those unfamiliar with that terminology, Category 3 was a federal land designation for roadless, backcountry areas that were slated for development.
Got it.
The ELF viewed this pristine wilderness as critical lynx habitat and, they chose catastrophic arson as their method of intervention.
I have to push back on the sheer irony of that logic.
Right.
Wait, so they burned down a mountain, releasing massive uncalculated carbon emissions into the atmosphere, completely toxifying the local watershed with ash and chemical runoff,
Yeah.
all to quote-unquote protect nature.
It is a glaring contradiction. And it really highlights the often counterproductive extremes of radical environmentalism during that era.
Yeah, definitely.
The strategy was purely about inflicting unbearable economic damage to halt development, with zero regard for the immediate ecological fallout of the fires themselves.
It's just wild to think about.
But, if we look at the evolution of the threat to these mountain communities, the late 90s were defined by the unpredictability of radicalized individuals.
Right.
Today, the unpredictability comes from the climate itself.
We've basically traded the unpredictability of human arsonists for the creeping systemic unpredictability of climate-driven wildfires.
Which you can't exactly arrest.
No, exactly. You can't indict a 41-year low snowpack. You can only figure out how to survive it. Which brings us to the community's modern defense mechanisms.
Yeah, the sources detail some highly proactive steps kicking off this very week.
Let's hear them.
So the Edwards Metro District is initiating a massive curbside shipping program. The goal is to help local properties maintain their Firewise certification.
Okay, but doing what?
By drastically reducing the fuel load in the ignition zones around homes, clearing brush, dead wood, that sort of thing.
Wait, I'm struggling with the timeline here, though. If the snowpack is at a 41-year low and the vegetation is drying out months earlier than normal, isn't mid-May dangerously late to just be starting a brush clearing program? Like, why wait until now?
Well, it's a classic logistical bottleneck of mountain living.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you can't easily run heavy chipping machinery or clear massive brush piles when the ground is still frozen, or when it's trapped under the deep mud of the spring melt.
Oh, even if the overall moisture content of that mud is disastrously low.
Exactly. You have to wait for the ground to harden enough to physically support the infrastructure, which creates a very narrow, high-stress window to clear the fuel before the summer lightning season begins.
Wow, okay. That makes sense. The logistics dictate the timeline. But the part of the mitigation strategy that absolutely fascinated me is how they are handling the terrain that humans simply cannot reach.
Oh, the mowers.
Yes, they are deploying autonomous RC mowers.
It is such a brilliant application of substituting technology for physical risk.
Tell me about it.
They're using remote-controlled tracked mowers to clear heavy brush on dangerously steep mountain inclines.
Areas where you could never safely send a human crew with chainsaws.
Right. It's just too steep.
It's like deploying a fleet of heavy-duty Roombas. But instead of picking up dust, they are systematically chewing up the dead fuel layer on 40-degree cliff faces.
To starve a potential wildfire before it starts?
It's crazy. It preserves the lush backgrounds you see in everyone's hiking content, but it's maintained purely through robotic engineering.
Yeah, when you have a valley facing severe drought, creating fire breaks on aggressive topography is a critical layer of defense. The RC mowers represent the industrialization of survival.
That realization that surviving the environment requires immense localized industrial effort, it ties into a much larger shift happening in the valley.
How so?
Because if you are re-engineering the physical landscape to survive, you also have to re-engineer the logistics of the people running the machinery. The physical geography of power in the valley is migrating.
Oh, absolutely. The shifting of administrative gravity is a major theme in today's sources.
Right.
Eagle County government operations have officially transitioned away from their aging facilities in Avon.
Okay, where to?
They have consolidated into the newly opened 28,000 square foot Eagle County Commons. It's located westward in the Edwards Corps at 410 Miller Ranch Road.
And this move is happening at a highly critical moment.
Very critical.
If you live in this valley, this structural shift directly impacts your ability to participate in local governance, because this new facility serves as the nerve center for the upcoming June 30 state primary election.
Yes. The in-person vote centers at the new Commons open on June 22.
Okay.
But the sources highlight a very specific procedural mechanism that voters must navigate, particularly unaffiliated voters, which, make up a massive portion of the electorate in resort towns.
Because Colorado has open primaries, right?
Yes, exactly.
Because a huge percentage of the resort workforce is transient or chooses not to align with a major party, open primaries are designed to boost turnout by mailing unaffiliated voters the ballots for both major parties.
The intent is maximizing access.
Right.
However, the mechanical rule of the system, and this trips people up every single election cycle, is that an unaffiliated voter must only return one of those ballots.
You cannot vote in both primaries.
Right.
What actually happens if someone fills out both the Democratic and Republican ballots and puts them back in the same return envelope? Like, how does the system handle that?
Well, the optical scanners used to process the ballots are physically calibrated to read individual voter barcodes.
Okay.
If the machine scans two completed ballots tied to a single unaffiliated voter, it immediately flags it as an overvote.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the system completely jams the democratic mechanism to prevent fraud, meaning both ballots are invalidated.
Mhm.
You effectively cancel out your own participation.
It's a simple user error that completely nullifies your voice. But looking at this massive 28,000 square foot facility in Edwards, it raises a bigger question. By moving the administrative, electoral, and political epicenter westward down the valley to Edwards is the traditional Vail core, like the historic, famous heart of the ski resort, losing its grip as the true heart of the community.
Well, if we look at the underlying economics, the answer is increasingly yes.
Really?
Yeah, the westward shift of government services perfectly tracks the westward migration of the local workforce.
Oh, that makes sense.
The people who actually operate the valley, the teachers, the emergency responders, the election officials, the hospitality managers, they have been systematically pushed down valley by insurmountable housing costs near the ski slopes.
And the housing market itself is reacting to these compounding pressures in real time. The sources indicate the mountain real estate market is currently in the middle of a spring slump.
Right. Historically, spring is a robust transition period for resort real estate as buyers look to secure properties for the summer season.
Sure, get a place before the summer rush.
But the unusually warm winter and the stark lack of snow have severely cooled buyer enthusiasm.
It's pure psychology. If you are preparing to drop $5 or $10 million on a luxury ski chalet, but the mountain outside your window looks like a brown dirt hill in February because of a 41-year drought, you might hesitate to sign the papers.
You definitely might.
Anyone looking into realtor or real estate in the valley right now isn't just looking at square footage or granite countertops. They are pricing in the geographic shifts, the water scarcity, and the reality of autonomous wildfire robots operating in their backyard.
The environmental deficit is being aggressively priced into the market. It shatters the long-held illusion that paying a premium price tag buys you immunity from the climate.
And that leads to a much deeper psychological fracture happening in these towns.
Yeah.
Because it's not just the illusion of climate immunity that's cracking, it's the illusion of physical security. People are realizing that geographic isolation doesn't guarantee safety either. Let's look at the concept the sources refer to as the paradise paradox.
So, the paradise paradox is a well-documented sociological phenomenon in affluent, aesthetically stunning communities.
Okay, what does it mean exactly?
It is the persistent cognitive bias that wealth, exclusivity, and beautiful natural surroundings insulate a town from real-world crime, tragedy, or violence.
It's the deeply ingrained mindset of, we live in a postcard, bad things just don't happen in a place that looks like this.
Exactly. But if we look at today's news feeds, we see a highly sobering national story dominating local mountain town awareness that proves how fragile that mindset really is.
Yeah.
Today marks the grim 100-day milestone in the search for Nancy Guthrie.
Right. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old, and she is the mother of NBC Today Show co-host Savannah Guthrie.
Yes.
And she was abducted from her home in the affluent Tucson, Arizona area back on January 31st.
The details of the investigation reveal systemic failures and extreme modern complexities. Pima County is currently investigating their own sheriff, Chris Nanos, over his department's handling of the crucial initial days of the disappearance.
Which is shocking.
According to the reports, it took the department 4 full days to even bring the FBI into the investigation.
4 days in an abduction case of an 84-year-old woman is an eternity. How does a delay like that even happen in a high-profile case?
It often comes down to local jurisdictions underestimating transnational or digital crime. In the initial hours, local police might treat a missing elderly person as a medical wandering case.
Oh, like she just got lost.
Exactly. By the time the realization of an abduction sets in, the trail has gone cold. And this case was immediately complicated by highly sophisticated cryptocurrency ransom demands.
The crypto aspect changes the entire nature of the crime.
It really does.
It morphs it from a physical, localized kidnapping into a borderless digital extortion plot. The sources also mentioned completely fabricated sightings down in Mexico that were designed to intentionally scatter law enforcement resources.
Just a total nightmare for investigators.
There is currently an active $1 million reward for her safe return. But here's the question. Why is an unsolved abduction from the Arizona desert leading the news cycles in the high-altitude ski towns of Colorado?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, It's because of the interconnected psychology of Western enclaves.
Okay.
When a high-profile, well-resourced family experiences a random, devastating crime inside a high-wealth neighborhood, it sends a psychological shockwave through similar communities across the West.
It forces the realization that if a gated, affluent community in Tucson isn't safe from sophisticated criminal networks, then a private enclave in Vail or Edwards isn't safe either.
It completely shatters the paradise paradox. Criminal mobility doesn't respect municipal boundaries, zip codes, or median home prices.
Let's be real, criminals have cars and the internet.
Right. This type of news keeps local law enforcement and residents on high alert, serving as a harsh reminder that geographic isolation in a beautiful valley is not a substitute for active security.
We are just looking at the facts of this case as they stand in the sources,
Yeah.
but the cumulative weight of this deep dive is undeniably heavy.
Very heavy.
We have the historical trauma of the 1998 eco-terrorism arson, the existential daily anxiety of a 41-year drought, the economic pressures pushing the workforce out of the core, and this looming national awareness of physical vulnerability. It sounds like an exhausting operational load for a community to carry.
It requires immense resilience just to maintain the status quo.
But let's look at the flip side of that resilience.
Yeah.
Because the sources take a really inspiring turn here.
Oh, definitely.
Despite all of that heavy machinery operating in the background, the local youth are actively redefining what it means to thrive in this rugged environment.
The contrast is truly striking. While the adults are managing water deficits, electoral mechanics, and community security, the high school athletes are achieving unprecedented levels of physical performance.
They really are.
The sources highlight the incredible achievements of Eagle Valley High School seniors at the recent state track championships, which were held at Jeffco Stadium down in Lakewood.
The numbers these kids are putting up are absolute athletic marvels. Let's look at Tyler Blair.
Okay.
He concluded his high school track career by completely obliterating school records. He ran the 1,600 meter, which is roughly a mile, in 4 minutes and 14.39 seconds.
That is just incredibly fast.
For context, running a 4.14 mile means he was chaining together 4 consecutive 63-second laps. He also ran the 800 meter in 1 minute and 52.99 seconds.
The sheer biomechanical output is incredible. We also have to mention his teammate, Jason Flaherty, who placed 4th overall in the highly competitive 4A state high jump with a personal best mark of 6 feet, 5 inches.
6'5". The kid is literally jumping over the height of a standard kitchen refrigerator.
Literally.
But looking specifically at Tyler Blair's cardio times, we have to talk about the physiological mechanics of where these kids live.
Yeah, the altitude.
Growing up and training in the thin, oxygen-deprived air of the Eagle River Valley, which sits at roughly 7,000 to 8,000 feet above sea level, is essentially natural altitude doping.
Physiologically, when you train at that altitude, the air pressure is significantly lower, meaning each breath delivers less oxygen to the blood.
Right.
To compensate, the human body adapts by producing more erythropoietin, or EPO.
Okay, what does that do?
It stimulates the production of more red blood cells. It also increases capillary density in the muscle tissue.
So they are literally building superior internal cardiovascular engines just by existing in the valley.
Exactly. When athletes with those physiological adaptations come down to lower elevations to compete, like the stadium in Lakewood, their blood can carry significantly more oxygen to their muscles than their sea-level competitors.
It's like they've been forced to run with a weighted vest on their lungs for their entire high school career, and the state championship is the one day they finally get to take it off.
That's a great way to put it.
Athletes from flatland communities simply cannot replicate that kind of built-in physiological advantage. I love this dynamic because right now, millions of tourists are sitting on their couches searching for what to do in Colorado or casually browsing Colorado activities for an easy summer vacation.
While the locals are grinding.
Exactly. Meanwhile, these local teenagers are out there treating this harsh, unforgiving valley as their own personal, high-performance athletic laboratory.
It reframes the narrative of the environment. The landscape is undeniably challenging. It's dry, it's prone to fire, the air is thin, and the logistics of living there are incredibly complex.
Yeah.
But that exact same harsh environment is the forge that produces that level of elite capability. The resistance is the point.
Okay, we've covered a massive amount of ground in this deep dive. We started by looking back 20 years at the dark, destructive legacy of the Vail Mountain eco-terrorism arson, and examined how the community today is fighting back against climate-driven wildfires by deploying curbside shipping logistics and autonomous cliff-climbing robot mowers.
We tracked the westward migration of the valley's political and administrative power to the new Eagle County Commons in Edwards, and broke down the specific mechanical hurdles that unaffiliated voters face in the upcoming primary elections.
We zoomed out to examine the sociology of the Paradise Paradox, discussing the sobering, interconnected Western ripple effects of the Nancy Guthrie search crossing its 100-day mark.
And finally, we ended on the absolute triumph of local athletes smashing state track records, fueled by the biomechanics of thin mountain air.
What this collection of sources ultimately reveals is that a mountain resort community is vastly more complex than the image presented on its postcards.
It really is. It is a highly dynamic, living organism that has to constantly re-engineer its infrastructure, its economy, and its psychology to survive its climate, its history, and its own growth.
And that leaves us with a final provocative thought for you to ponder on your own.
Oh, late on them.
If the cutting-edge technology needed to fight wildfires, like those remote-controlled mowers, and the essential infrastructure needed to run the government, and the elections continue to move further and further away from the historic ski slopes and into the lower valleys,
Yeah.
will the future identity of these mountain towns be defined by the towering peaks themselves, or by the people managing the complex machinery in the valleys below them?
It's a fascinating question of whether the natural landscape or the human logistics will ultimately dictate the culture.
That is the perfect place to leave it. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the postcards and stay curious.